So welcome to B-Sides. There's going to be a lot of talks. You're going to learn a lot of stuff. One of the most important things is meet people. So if you don't know the person next to your left or right, or you want to reach out to somebody, go shake their hand. This is conversations that need to be made in the security industry. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right, here we go. Sponsors. We can't do it without them. So we've got Critical Stack and Vail Mail is our inner circle sponsors. Our stellar sponsors are Amazon, BlackBerry, the National Security Agency, Cylance, Microsoft, Robinhood, Secure Code Warrior, and Paranoids. If you want to become a sponsor, come enlist. We need your help. This is how it all works. Okay? We're going to be video recording this in the back, so I kindly ask that you turn your cell phones to vibrate mode, please. If you have to take a call, please step out. That gives the speakers exactly what they need to do to kind of explain what they're doing. Make sense?
Yeah.
You guys know these two gentlemen?
Yes.
They've done it many times. They need no introduction, so I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thank you. Hi, Josh Corman, one of the founders of Am The Cavalry.
Beau Woods, I do things.
This is our 6th birthday. We were born here. Anybody who's been a part since day one or even today, give yourself a round of applause. Saving lives through security research. So we have a little bit of late start. We're probably going to go faster and mostly do story time. But I think each year we've tried to have a theme. You'll see some themes emerge through the schedule of some incredible speakers today and tomorrow. As we got closer and closer to this, I got a little frustrated with myself that when I was really approaching last year, I'm like, where are we as a movement, right? 5 years in. And I've really been trying to make sure that not only do we have activity and do we have milestones and do we have progress on safety critical, but that we actually are in a position that were there to be a large attack on, say, medical devices, that people would be safe. And I feel like we're most of the way there for medical, and we're sort of the way there for cars. And in the last year, we said, hey, look, we have a blueprint. We know it works. I can't wait to see what you guys do with it. And Beau's going to highlight some of the stories about the journey thus far for him that gave us courage or motivation through the hard times. I may share one too if there's time permitting. But I also I felt like year over year, at least for the one I focus on, I decided to go really, really deep on medical. Right? We've done so many things on medical. It's way ahead. Can we get one of these things across the finish line so that we have a blueprint start to finish on this is how you make a safe, defensible, resilient, trustworthy, safety critical space. And that way, everyone who started this thing like the aviation village at DEF CON this year, or the maritime village, or the biohacking, or all these adjacent ones could then learn from our mistakes and follow that recipe start to finish. Now, of course, there's some beautiful, unique snowflakes but I felt very frustrated at how stuck we were. And what it really forced me to do is get back to first principles. So I think the audio sucks, but I want to share a more personal bit just at the beginning here, and then pivot into maybe how we can get through this stuck period. So there's plenty of good news, guys. I don't want to be a downer on it. It's just the struggle is real, the journey's been hard, and the room gets bigger, and the participants get more vast, and we are doing great things. Just I always want to go faster or be in a much more defensible state. So has anybody here not seen Marvel's Infinity War and Endgame? I'm going to keep it spoiler free. Okay. A lot of you guys know that I want to be a protector. I think a lot of us in this room are drawn because we want to be protectors. We talk about the motivations of protectors, puzzlers, prestige, profit, protest. This crowd, this tribe within the tribes has really been about protectors and puzzlers that want to do things that matter and want to do things that are hard. I had a really freaking hard year without making this autobiographical, especially with a tiny compressed thing. I just felt like this theme of just getting your ass kicked over and over. And without sound, this is one of the scenes from Captain America's first movie. No superpowers, still standing up to bullies. Doesn't know when to give up. He says, I could do this all day, right? Later in the same movie, he's got superpowers. He's a super soldier. He's the ultimate paladin fighting a super villain. But now, more defiantly, kind of owning his own skills. He says, I could do this all day, right? But then I was thinking about the full arc of the hero's journey here. And if you get to Civil War, so there's an ideological schism between the heroes, and they start fighting each other. And it takes on a very different tone now. He's fighting Tony Stark, right? They both want to do right. They disagree on how. Sometimes the hardest fight isn't against the Red Skull, it's against your friends. Stands up one more time. Anybody know what the line's going to be? It's almost hard to notice if you don't put them back to back. I could do this all day, right? And without spoilers, this is in the movie trailer for Endgame. Everybody knows Chris Evans' contract's up. This scene is in the trailer, so unless you haven't seen the trailer, it's not a spoiler. And he's probably not going to do any more movies. So I'm figuring one last time, maybe he makes his last stand. He's beaten, his shield's broken, his arm's all cut up, exhausted. So everybody's waiting for him to say, I could do this all day, right? But at least for me this year was a really hard year. I felt pretty beat up. And I'm not sure we're in the end game right now, but I feel like we're close. And I know there's a lot of fight in me. I know there's a lot of fight in each of you. But at some point, we're going to fight our last fight. And I was questioning if that was where I was. And I'm still fighting with that. It's been a struggle, and there's a lot of setbacks. There's a lot of advances, which give us hope. So one of the things we're going to hopefully do with story time here is speak to some of our most hopeful moments. But what follows next, if you've seen the movie, we'll come back to that maybe without a spoiler. But it's, little old Cap versus a lot of bad people. So as we head into this, just one more idea to tee up. Instead of bringing you a polished idea, we talked about one of the reasons we did so well at first is we did a workshop. We did this DerbyCon, Constitutional Congress. So what do we want to do? How do we want to do it? What are our first principles? And I've been struggling with this idea of something that's the polar opposite. We did these things like the 5-star automotive cyber safety framework for cars. It was a huge milestone. We just said, you have to be this tall to ride the Internet of Cars. And then Beau beautifully translated those principles into the FDA, right? Medical language, using the Hippocratic Oath, things they already care about. Don't make them care about our stuff. Make them understand how what they already care about maps to our stuff. Really beautiful. And please don't groan when I show this. I kept thinking, what's the doppelganger of the cyber kill chain? Like, what's the polar opposite? And I kind of hate the cyber kill chain, and a lot of people outside our industry hate the cyber idea and the kill chain idea. It's very aggressive, it's very militaristic. But in general, offense is easy, defense is hard, and we're getting our asses kicked, mostly, right? And we always talk about that, and we kind of resign ourselves to think that's just how it's going to be. But the only hope people derive from this cyber kill chain is if you can disrupt just one link of that chain, the breach doesn't happen, right? So how could you flip that? I'm like, a life chain, a safe chain, a protection chain, and I still couldn't get it prepared enough for here. So I don't want to solve it on my own. I kind of want to workshop it with you guys. So where I've flipped to is this notion of a lifeline. So what are all the steps we have to take to make sure that there's no mass casualty event in hospitals? Is it enough to write a Hippocratic Oath? No. Is it enough to build trust with the regulator like the FDA? Well, that helps. Is it enough to change regulatory guidance? Yeah, but we won't see the fruits of that for 6 years. Is it enough to get the FDA to do a recall? That's really helpful, right? But we're not really done until doctors and physicians and hospitals act on those recalls. And that's where I've been stuck for about a year. I just keep trying harder and harder, and I'm not really making a dent on that. And when you keep trying the same thing over and over, expecting different results, I think there's a phrase for that. But if there's this notion of a lifeline, what are all the necessary steps? And on this long one here, this is the medical one. We've done an incredible amount of work on medical. But we just can't seem to get through to hospitals and physicians yet. So I both want to invite you guys this week, all week, here by the pool or at Biohacking Village or somewhere around DEF CON. Let's start workshopping how we might define this lifeline as a model to map different safety critical industries and a roadmap for how to have the most impact. How long that lifeline is matters. How many links in that rope. Now maybe, just like we said when we launched here 6 years ago, maybe people have to die first, and during that crisis, we're gonna throw a lifeline to somebody. They still gotta catch it, they still have to accept the help, but we can do everything we can to make sure we're as ready as possible for that flashpoint in that moment. So instead of giving that answer, maybe Beau, we can pivot to story time. But
Yeah.
you wanna go first?
Sure. So, anybody recognize this photo? Handful of people. So, this is a mannequin that they use in clinical simulations. If you ever took like CPR in your high school, middle school, or whatever, so a really primitive version of this that you were working on. This thing costs like $100,000. It gives out like realistic heartbeat vital signs, and it responds. It has a speaker and a microphone in it, so it like actually makes noise. And this is the result of a clinical hacking simulation that we did in Arizona in 2017, I think, where we brought physicians into a room where they didn't know what was going to happen. We had a script that all the nurses and the clinical staff knew, and we had a patient who was they call him a standardized patient. It's an actor who comes in, not that guy, but somebody else who comes in presenting with conditions, and the doctor has to figure out what's going on and treat the symptoms, right? It's like, it's kind of like red teaming doctors a little bit. So this particular situation was where a patient was getting shocked by their pacemaker every 60 seconds or so. They had a high voltage shock, and it was obviously hurting them. Patient came in, doctor started treating him, was like, oh, okay, well, we know how to deal with this. We just put a magnet over it, and it goes back, resets to defaults. Except in this case, pacemaker was hacked. And so it didn't reset to defaults because those are all software driven. So what ended up happening is after the patient died a couple of times and the doctor brought them back, the doctor actually had to cut the patient open and snip the leads to the pacemaker to stop it shocking them. But because it's a pacemaker, it's keeping them alive. So now you have to have some kind of a manual backup process to keep the patient alive while you can figure out how to fix the underlying problems here. So this was a real eye-opener for, I think, a lot of physicians that watched this happen. It was an eye-opener for a lot of the other people in the room who watched it happen in real time. And talking to the doctor, they said, I would never have suspected that the device was hacked. I just would have swapped it out with another one, thrown this one away, and gone on my way. This actually got filmed. We filmed it for Nightline, and if you haven't already seen the Nightline episode, go watch it. It was actually really well done for a TV outlet that's massively mainstream. You wouldn't think that they would have the ability to do nuance, but Josh and I and several other folks worked with them for months so that they understood the context, understood what was going to happen, understood why it matters, and they put together a really well nuanced story. Now, they did a lead-in that was like hyperbole, really scary, but the actual pieces that they filmed with us were, I think, pretty tastefully done for, like I said, a mass media outlet. And I think this changed, at least in my mind, it changed a kind of a public consciousness, a public awareness moment. Now I can point to a mainstream media outlet that has filmed realistic hacking of a medical device to show what would happen, so we don't actually have to see people die. We can see the mannequin supposedly die. And I think that was a really, really powerful thing that now all of us can use to get more traction, to get more engagement with people who, as geeks and hackers, we sometimes have a hard time explaining what we care about to people. But for a mass, if this is, consumable by my mother or my cousins, then it's consumable by pretty much anybody we talk to, and it's only like 7 minutes. So I think this changed a lot for me anyways, in the way that I'm able to explain why what we do matters to people.
Yeah, and very related to medical, and sometimes I get accused that the cavalry is just a medical thing just because I talk about medical so much. But remember, it's wherever bits and bytes meet flesh and blood, so there's plenty of you in the room doing projects that are aviation or high-speed rail or cars or industrial control systems, building automation, any safety-related things. For me, the big surprise that gave me a bunch of, in fact, Suzanne's going to get here shortly, but when we launched, Jay Radcliffe was in the room. We had talked to Billy Rios earlier. Barnaby Jack had just lost his life. And a lot of the talk track in our prep was, the FDA is not going to listen. No one's going to do anything until people die. So I just acknowledged that in the room. I said, hey, look, it's possible that even if we do all this stuff, no one's really going to listen until there's dead bodies. In fact, Adrian Matuition latches on to that Internet of Bodies concept, which includes this and some other relationships between humanity and technology. So we just took that as a given. And somehow by building trust with part of the founding principles of the cavalry were empathy, be a helping hand instead of a pointing finger, be focused on future success instead of past failures, meet them at their level, use their language, bridge their language and belief to ours. And in doing that, we didn't know if it would work, but it did. And we very quickly built trust with Suzanne at the FDA, Suzanne Schwartz, to the point where she's now here in Vegas every year, and she's going to do the Do No Harm panel again at DEF CON, and she'll be here talking to all of you guys today and tomorrow. But she's been one of the pioneers that's really advanced that lifeline as far as we have on any of the safety critical things. We had teammates in Congress, we had teammates in the White Houses of the last couple of administrations, but in general, a lot of it's Suzanne's courage. Now, through that process, Billy had previously found a flaw in a bedside infusion pump, a Hospira. He gave the vendor a calendar year before he'd go public. And about 300 days into that, somebody else found a similar flaw and just went public directly. And that really got the FDA to say, well, wait a second, if we make it hard for someone to do the safe thing, we're buying time for someone else to do an unsafe thing. And from that point on, we started bringing hackers into the FDA with the help of MITRE and others. And we started harmonizing our language, and we had some shouting matches. It was, what's wrong with you people? Why would you hack a perfectly good medical device? Lives get saved by this stuff. Why do you do it? And that's where we came up with these little things like the 5 Ps of profit, politics, prestige, protection, and whatnot. And fast forward, and just about a month and a half into that, true ambassador translator work, they found their regulatory footing, used their regulatory power, and right before DEF CON, called me up and said, can you talk to Reuters today? I said, sure. Why am I talking to Reuters? He said, because we're going to do first ever safety communication for cyber reasons. I'm like, did somebody die? Because the primary standard of care historically was proof of harm. Someone has to get hurt, has to be directly linked to this, probably several people. And I had to do a double take, and I'm like, wait, nobody got hurt? And initially I was just feeling like a shot of adrenaline, like everybody said this wouldn't work, maybe it's working. And I kind of felt like a intellectual victory. But when my daughters got home from school and saw me actually happy for a minute, I tried to translate a bunch of cyber policy stuff into 11-year-old. And as I started midway, I'm like, well, we said people have to die, and then I just started sobbing. Now, some of you have heard this story a couple times, but it really hit me. Nobody died. So the brave altruistic idiots in this group that wanted to try something had no idea if it would work. In fact, we said if we ever write a story of how this happened, we're going to call it, we have no idea what we're doing, but it seems to be working. But just bravely going in with the right heart, the right attitude, and focus on translator ambassador, looking for something right in our teammates, looking for how to foster that. And nobody died. So to me, other than the birth of my 2 children, that was the proudest moment of my life. And then we were just addicted. We want to keep doing it. Now we're a little short on time because of the late start. So I'm going to cut some of that story short. But one of the reasons I have heartache is during WannaCry, when Beau and I hadn't slept for weeks, the whole week. It started on Friday, Mother's Day weekend. And he did his stuff, I did my stuff. We converged around DHS and HHS. I was in Europe. It was a horrible week. I come back from The Hague, and I have to take my daughter to the emergency room. I just wanted a nap. I just wanted to take a little nap. And after 8 or 9 hours in the emergency room, because none of the computers worked, because it was frickin' WannaCry, I went home for 10 minutes to get her pajamas because we were clearly going to be there all night. And I came back, and she's hooked up to the one device on Earth I know can kill her. 2 years after the recall. And do I think she's going to die from an overdose of saline? No. But I just felt wait, this is one of our top accomplishments, and our hospital hasn't replaced it. So we started poking around, and basically no hospitals had replaced it. And I met with the CIO of my hospital. I said, I know you guys don't have a lot of budget, but maybe when you replace these, or maybe you can just shut off the wireless for these. And they said, oh, yeah, we'll take care of it. Well, fast forward another year and a half later, I'm getting surgery in the same hospital. They're trying to hook me up to that same unpatched, unpatchable pump. And I don't think I'm in imminent mortal danger, but we're one sloppy internet noise attack away from a mass casualty event. And it's totally preventable. We've actually done the work, right? That goes back to the lifeline. And that's why it's really inspiring moments where we have these huge victories that we can pivot into others. And then it's a real sobering shot right back down to reality that we still have a lot more work to do. And instead of us trying to present throughout the rest of the week, really just want to ask for help, because when I go back to that lifeline stuff, I started thinking, what were the major milestones I would have labeled these with? Is it a 5-star or a Hippocratic Oath? Well, yeah, that's one. Is it getting a high trust relationship with a regulator? That's another one, sure. Is it having the first recall from that industry? That's a huge one, right? That was the one I thought, was a major victory, shattered our expectations. But I was going to do a sight gag if we hadn't had a late start, but I reflected more on it. It's not really what we accomplished, it's who we earned trust with. Every time we added a new teammate with a different background and a different perspective and a different undergraduate degree, with a different worldview, with different relationships, we solved the next step of the puzzle. So maybe it's not what do we do next, it's who do we bring into the fold next? Who's currently watching that could be leading? Or who needs to be encouraged to get to the table? Or who knows what to do but doesn't have the experience trying something new and might just need a little nudge? And to that end, I'm going to pivot pretty hard, pretty quick. Some of you guys know that Jack Daniel and I, like 9 years ago, did a stress and burnout study. Well, RSA finally said, oh, wait, stress and burnout's a thing. So they had me interview the woman who invented the stress and burnout study, Dr. Christina Masloch. And as we're talking about this, which she's done for most of her career, so she's really bored with some of it, but she's still pretty brilliant. Those 3 contributors are fatigue, cynicism, and efficacy. Do you feel like you can do a good job? And there's a lot of burnout in our stuff. She talks about all these things I'm going to skip. But one of the things that really struck a chord with me is one particular industry seems to resemble us a lot, which is nursing, which is when nurses get burned out, they turn vicious on each other. It's a very toxic culture. So you have the initial stress, and instead of looking for camaraderie, you have an additional stress. So there's a feedback loop of toxic behavior. So as I started talking about this with her, I said, so we got a burnout thing, and one of the top contributors is exhaustion, right? Well, where does the exhaustion come from? We have a really bad workforce shortage. And I'm going to be too terse here, so I'll explain it more in the hallways and at the pool. But one of the reasons we have a strategic workforce problem of not 1 million shortfall jobs like 2 years ago, but 4 million now, we've kind of tapped out the computer science privileged white guys. I mean, I'm not trying to over-trivialize it, but we really do struggle with diversity. And it's not just getting diversity in, it's also our churn rate. We're driving them out. With 2 daughters, I'm trying to get them into tech and everything, and then I watch some of the really terrible behavior like we saw with ILMOB, or the gatekeeping, or the rock star stuff where people own a topic. And then I said, you know what drives a lot of our diversity challenge? It's the way we treat each other. And we kind of celebrate our culture in the hacker community. Now, BSides has always been one of the friendlier cultures. But this kind of loop means that our toxicity perpetuates our diversity challenge, which perpetuates our exhaustion because we're doing 3 jobs at a time, which perpetuates our burnout. And when I put that in context, this was the simplest way I could do it. And I wish FDA was here to watch so I could watch their faces. So can anybody in the room, I'm going to just really fast, so you got to answer fast. Can anybody name a really badass, world-class car hacker? Quick. Anybody? Balasek, Charlie Miller, okay. Can anybody name 10? All right, can anybody name a world-class, badass, coordinated vulnerability disclosure expert? Katie, can anybody name 10? All right, can anybody name a world-class, badass, threat modeling expert? Adam Shostak, right? Can anybody name 10? Well, guess what? We need 10,000 this year. The FDA listened to us and they said you can't bring a new medical device to market unless you have a threat model. There are 10,000 medical device makers trying to bring new devices to market. They're going to save lives, improve treatment, reduce cost of care. we have failed. And I'm not trying to be mean to us. We have not developed a field. Now, maybe it's not Chris Valicek's job or Charlie Miller's job or Katie's job or Adam's job to field develop. Maybe it's not their responsibility. But objectively, we have not developed a field of practice. And I don't think it's just that we didn't try. I think we actively prevent it. And one thing I want to suggest to us is that if we get back to our first principles of empathy, of being a helping hand, of being a translator, ambassador, I'm also concerned about the overall cultural climate outside of hackers, where we're looking for hyperpolarization, or we're looking for what's wrong with something somebody said, or we clutch to our truth instead of being open to somebody else's. Every single advance we made on that lifeline, every single fucking one, came from us looking for one piece of common ground with a new teammate, and then fully integrating our world views and needs with their world views and needs. And the only tribe I can think of is the B-Sides tribe, and more specifically the people in this room. Can we at least lead by example that it's not about what next step on our roadmap we do to advance cyber safety, it's who else can we bring into the fold, and which attitudes and heart do we have to bring to the problem? Because that's going to be the difference between, you know, the culture of love and hugs and admiration or everything else. So I want to promote transparency. I want to promote finding what's right with something where it's just too easy to find everything wrong with stuff. Let's flip ourselves here. The empathy, the respect, the encouragement, that we're civil to even people that disagree with us, so we can get to a point where we're driving 10,000. Now, will there be 10,000 really good threat modelers in year one? No. But can we start them on a journey from Crayola drawings of threat models to maybe something better later, instead of being purists about it? And in the context of this, you know, some of you will not get the spoilers, but if you know what follows this, this is kind of the fork in the road. Are we aware that we're fighting in the end game, or are we still fighting the Civil War and fighting each other? And I'm really looking for this group to choose wisely. So that's all I got to say. Thanks.